The call came on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, a day cold enough to make the bones ache. Liam was on a scaffold 20 stories above the city, securing a crossbeam on a new residential tower. The wind was a physical thing, a bully trying to shove him from his perch. He saw his phone light up inside his jacket pocket, the screen showing Sarah's picture. He smiled, his breath fogging in the frigid air. He unclipped his safety harness, moved to a more sheltered position, and answered. "Hey you," he said, his voice loud against the wind. "Just about to break for lunch. What's up?" He heard a sniffle on the other end, a choked, wet sound that instantly extinguished the warmth in his chest. "Sarah? What's wrong? Is it Emily? Is she okay?" "Emily's fine," she whispered. "She's at school. It's my mother." Liam's jaw tightened. Eleanor, of course. What did she do now? She called about Thursday, about Thanksgiving. Sarah's voice cracked, and he knew what was coming. He knew it with the same certainty that he knew a poorly set foundation would eventually lead to collapse. He had been feeling the tremors for years. They think it would be better if it was just family this year," Sarah stammered, the words tumbling out in a rush of shame. "Mom said with Dad's business partners coming, and Judge Hemlock. It's about appearances, and I don't fit the appearance," Liam finished for her, his voice flat and dead. The wind didn't feel cold anymore. He felt nothing at all. 20 stories up, and the most dangerous fall was the one happening inside him. "Liam, please don't be angry. It's not you. It's them. You know how they are. She said your work is messy, that you might talk about drywall and lumber prices, and it would be awkward for the other guests. She said it would be best for everyone. Best for everyone." The phrase hung in the air, a perfect crystalline monument to their contempt. For 5 years he had tried. He had worn the stuffy, ill-fitting suits to their cocktail parties, stood silently while their friends asked him condescending questions about his trade. He had swallowed the casual insults from his father-in-law, Richard, who called him the carpenter, as if it were a slur. He had endured the pitying looks from his mother-in-law, Eleanor, who would pointedly wipe her hand after shaking his, as if sawdust were a communicable disease. He had done it all for Sarah because he loved her, and because he believed naively that his hard work, his honesty, his devotion to her and their daughter Emily would eventually count for something. "It's not you, it's them," she had said, but she was their proxy. She was the one delivering the blow. He could hear the weakness in her voice, the desperate need to keep the peace with the parents who still held the purse strings to her sense of self-worth. "So I'm banned from Thanksgiving," Liam said, the words tasting like rust. "Because I'm poor. Because I work with my hands." "Don't say it like that," she pleaded. "It's just this one time. We'll have our own Thanksgiving on Friday, just us and Emily. It'll be special." But it wouldn't. It would be a consolation prize, a meal seasoned with humiliation. He looked out over the city, a sprawling tapestry of steel and glass. He had helped build this city. His hands had shaped parts of it. From this height, he could almost see the quiet, tree-lined street where the Hamiltons lived, Magnolia Lane, an enclave of obscene wealth and carefully curated pedigrees, a place he could visit but never belong. "Liam, are you there? Please say something." "I have to get back to work, Sarah," he said, his voice a stranger's. "I'll see you tonight." He hung up before she could reply, the silence that followed louder than the howling wind. He clipped his harness back on and grabbed his rivet gun. The trigger felt cold and solid in his grasp. He drove a rivet into the steel beam with a percussive roar, the force of it vibrating up his arm. He fired another, and another, and another, each one a nail in the coffin of the man he had tried to be for them. The compliant, grateful, blue-collar husband. That man was gone. He had been uninvited, excised, and in his place something new and hard and cold was beginning to form. He looked down at his hands, calloused and capable. They thought his hands were for rough, simple work. They had no idea what he could truly build, or what he could tear down. That night, the house was quiet. Sarah had tried to talk to him, her eyes red-rimmed and pleading, but Liam had retreated into a silence she couldn't penetrate. He felt a chasm opening between them, and for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to cross it. He put Emily to bed, reading her a story about a clever fox who outsmarted a pack of arrogant wolves. Her small hand was curled in his, her breathing soft and even. This was what mattered, this tiny, perfect person. The Hamiltons' world of appearances and judgment threatened her, too. They would teach her to be ashamed of her own father. The thought was a shard of ice in his gut. After Emily was asleep, he didn't go to the bedroom he shared with Sarah. Instead, he went down to his basement workshop. The scent of sawdust and wood glue was his sanctuary. Here, he was not the carpenter. He was a craftsman, a creator. He ran his hand over a half-finished rocking horse he was making for Emily's birthday, its curves smooth and perfect. His work was not messy. It was precise. It was honest. He sat on his stool, the silence of the basement a welcome balm. His mind kept replaying the phone call, but the hurt was now crystallizing into something else. Anger, cold, clear, and focused. He thought back to the last time he'd been forced to attend a Hamilton family dinner, just a few weeks ago. It was an excruciating affair at Richard and Eleanor's mansion on Magnolia Lane. While Sarah helped her mother in the kitchen, Liam had been left adrift in the living room with Richard and his insufferable son, Chad. They had ignored him, of course, speaking to each other as if he were a piece of furniture. They were discussing their latest real estate venture, a luxury housing development called Willow Creek Estates. Liam remembered the smug, self-congratulatory tone in Richard's voice. "The whole portfolio is brilliantly leveraged," Richard had boasted, swirling a glass of scotch. "We use the Magnolia Lane equity to secure the primary financing. Creative, eh? The bank gets the prestige of being associated with our neighborhood, and we get a favorable rate to build the next one." Chad, who had all of his father's arrogance and none of his cunning, had snickered. "Creative is one word for it. It's a house of cards, Dad, but it's a damn pretty one. As long as the Willow Creek lots sell fast, we're golden. If not," he'd shrugged, taking a swig of his own drink. "Well, that's what creative financing is for. We just shuffle the deck." At the time, Liam had filed it away as more rich guy talk, the kind of empty boasting they specialized in. But now, in the sterile quiet of his workshop, the words echoed with new meaning. A house of cards, shuffle the deck, leverage the Magnolia Lane equity. They weren't just bragging about their wealth. They were admitting to their risk. They had gambled their own homes, their entire exclusive pristine street, on a new venture. A slow, dangerous idea began to form in Liam's mind. It was audacious, impossible, but the conversation replayed again, and a detail he'd missed before suddenly stood out. Chad had mentioned the lender wasn't a traditional bank. "Some private equity sharks out of New York," he'd called them. "They don't care about relationships, just the numbers. Good for us, they're aggressive. Bad for us, they're ruthless if things go south." Liam stood up and walked over to his drafting table. He pulled out a clean sheet of paper and a pencil. For years, he'd used these tools to draw up blueprints for cabinets, for furniture, for home additions. Blueprints were about structure, about foundations, about understanding how things were put together, and by extension, how they could be taken apart. He began to sketch, not a house, but a network, a web of connections. At the center, he drew a box and labeled it Hamilton Family. Radiating out from it, he drew smaller boxes, Richard, Eleanor, Chad, their homes on Magnolia Lane. He drew a larger, more ominous box and labeled it Willow Creek Estates. Then he drew an arrow from the Magnolia Lane boxes to the Willow Creek box and wrote beside it, Leveraged Equity. Finally, he drew one more box, far off to the side, and wrote NY Private Equity. He connected it to everything. He stared at the drawing. It wasn't a family tree. It was a schematic of their vulnerability. They thought he was a simple man who understood wood and nails. They were right. He did understand those things. He understood that even the grandest mansion is only as strong as its foundation. And it looked to him like the Hamilton family had built their entire world on sand. The humiliation of the morning had been a wrecking ball, clearing the way for a new kind of construction. He wasn't just going to build, he was going to acquire. The first call he made was to David Chen. They had been friends since high school, back when Liam was the kid who could fix any engine, and David was the math nerd who could solve any equation. While Liam had gone to trade school and built a business with his hands, David had gone to Wharton and become a forensic accountant, a bloodhound who could sniff out financial rot from a mile away. "Liam, hey, it's been a while," David said, his voice warm but professional. "Everything okay? You sound different. "I need your help, Dave," Liam said, skipping the pleasantries. "I need you to look into a couple of things for me, discreetly, very discreetly." Liam laid it all out. The overheard conversation, the names Richard and Chad had dropped, the Willow Creek Estates project, the vague references to a New York private equity firm. He relayed the phrases that had stuck in his mind: brilliantly leveraged, house of cards, shuffle the deck. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Liam could almost hear the gears turning in David's analytical mind. "This is interesting, Liam. What's your stake in this? This is the family of your wife, right? The Hamiltons?" "They just uninvited me from Thanksgiving for being a construction worker," Liam said, the words stark and unadorned. Another pause, shorter this time. "Ah," David said, a world of understanding in that single syllable. "Okay, I see. This isn't a business query. This is personal." "It's both," Liam corrected him. "I think they're running a scam, Dave, and I think they're about to go under. I want to know how. I want to know everything." "Forensic accounting on a major developer and a private equity fund. That's not cheap, Liam. This will take time and resources." "I'll pay whatever it costs," Liam said, his voice firm. He had built his carpentry business from the ground up. He had a solid reputation, a healthy book of clients, and substantial savings. He had always been careful, always planning for a rainy day. He never imagined the storm he was saving for would be one of his own making. While David began his digital excavation, Liam started his own, more tangible investigation. He was a builder. He understood the physical world. He drove out to the Willow Creek Estates development, a half-finished ghost town of sprawling McMansions on the ex-urban fringe. He parked his truck down the road and walked the perimeter, his eyes scanning everything. The sign at the entrance promised uncompromising luxury and masterful craftsmanship. Liam snorted. He could see the compromise from 100 yards away. He knew the suppliers in this region. He knew the cost and quality of every 2x4, every window, every shingle. What he saw at Willow Creek was a masterclass in corner cutting. The exterior stonework was a thin, cheap veneer he knew would crack and spall within 5 years. The window frames were vinyl, not the high-end aluminum promised in the brochures he'd picked up. He peered into the unfinished shells of the houses. The framing lumber was a lower grade than code required for structures of this size, warped in places. He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, documenting every flaw, every shortcut. This wasn't just shoddy work, it was fraud. Richard Hamilton wasn't just a snob. He was a crook, passing off cheap materials as luxury and pocketing the difference. He was cheating his customers, his investors, and the banks. A few days later, Liam was reviewing his photos when a call came in from an old contact, a guy named Marco who ran a lumber yard. "Hey, Liam," Marco said. "Weird question for you. You doing any work with Hamilton Development?" "No. Why?" "Just, they put in a massive order with us a year ago for top-grade cedar siding and pressure-treated joists for that Willow Creek project. Paid a deposit. Then, a few months later, they canceled it. Said they found another supplier. But the thing is, I know all the other suppliers. Nobody else got that order. Then I hear from one of my drivers he saw trucks from a discount liquidator out of state delivering to their site. Stuff looked like seconds. I'm just saying, something's fishy over there." Liam's heart hammered in his chest. "Thanks for the info, Marco. I appreciate it." He hung up the phone. This was it. The physical evidence to back up the financial trail David was uncovering. Richard wasn't just using cheaper materials. He was allegedly buying premium, getting the loans to cover it, then canceling the orders and using garbage to build the houses, pocketing millions in the process. That evening, David called. His tone was electric. "You were right, Liam. You were so right. This isn't a house of cards. It's a full-blown Ponzi scheme built on a foundation of mortgage fraud." The picture David painted was even bleaker than Liam had imagined. The Hamiltons company was a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts. The Willow Creek project was massively over budget and behind schedule, precisely because of the cheap materials and the shoddy work, which required constant, expensive fixes. Sales had stalled. The entire venture was hemorrhaging money. "And the loan," David said, his voice dropping. "You were spot on. The primary debt is held by a firm called Scythe Capital Partners. A more fitting name I have never heard. They are corporate vultures, and according to my sources, They know the Willow Creek portfolio is toxic. The project is on the verge of default. Scythe wants out, and they want out now. They're looking to offload the entire debt package, a package secured by the personal assets of the Hamilton family. Liam's breath caught. What personal assets? Everything, David said. Their stock portfolios, their art collection, and the deeds to their primary residences, all 5 properties on Magnolia Lane. Richard Hamilton, in his arrogance, convinced his neighbors, his own family members and a couple of old friends, to join his investment pool. He leveraged their homes right alongside his own. If the Willow Creek loan defaults, Scythe Capital can seize the entire street. Liam stared at the schematic he had drawn on his drafting table. The lines of connection now seemed to glow with a terrible energy. Magnolia Lane, the symbol of everything he was not, the fortress of their privilege. And it was about to be stormed. Scythe is looking to sell the debt, David continued, his voice hushed with the enormity of it. They'll sell it at a steep discount just to wash their hands of the mess and claim a capital loss. They'll sell it to anyone who's willing to take the risk, anyone at all. Liam looked at his own hands. They were stained with wood varnish and marked with small scars from a lifetime of honest work. They were the hands the Hamiltons despised, and they were the hands that were about to pick up the sword Scythe Capital was so eager to drop. "Dave," Liam said, his voice steady and clear, "I don't just want to watch them fall. I want to be the one who pushes them. Tell me how we buy that debt. Tell me how I buy their street." The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. David laid it out over a secure video call, his face a mask of professional focus, though Liam could see the glint of excitement in his eyes. This was the kind of complex, high-stakes puzzle David was born to solve. "First, we create a ghost," David explained, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "An anonymous LLC, registered in Delaware for maximum privacy. It will have no public connection to you whatsoever. We'll call it Bedrock Holdings. A little inside joke for you." Liam smiled grimly. Bedrock. A foundation. It was perfect. "Second, we need capital. A lot of it. Scythe is desperate, so they'll sell the debt package for pennies on the dollar, but we're still talking millions. What's your liquidity situation?" Liam took a deep breath. This was the point of no return. "I have the business account, my personal savings, my retirement portfolio, a few stock investments I made years ago. All told, it's a little over $2 million. David whistled softly. "You've done well for yourself, Mr. Carpenter. Very well. But the face value of this debt is close to $30 million. Even at a steep discount, say 20 cents on the dollar, we'd need $6 million. The number felt like a physical blow. "I can't get that much," Liam said, the first flicker of doubt hitting him. "You can't," David agreed, "but we can. I have a few trusted clients, private investors, who love this kind of distressed asset play. They don't care about the story. They only care about the return. They're sharks, but they're our sharks. If we can put up a significant portion, say you're $2 million, as the primary risk capital, I think I can convince them to cover the rest. They'll get a majority of the final profit, but you'll get what you want. Control. Control." The word resonated deep in Liam's soul. For years he had been controlled by the Hamiltons' whims, their expectations, their judgment. The idea of flipping that dynamic was intoxicating. "But to do this, Liam," David's voice turned serious, "you have to go all in. You'll have to liquidate everything. Your business, your savings, everything. If this goes wrong, if the Hamiltons somehow find another investor and pay off the debt, you'll be left with nothing, less than nothing. You'll be exactly what they always accused you of being. Poor." The word hung unspoken in the air. He would lose his business, the one thing that gave him pride and independence. He would lose the security he had painstakingly built for his family. He thought of Emily. He thought of the rocking horse in the basement. Was this revenge worth that risk? Then he thought of Sarah's tearful voice on the phone. "It's for appearances." He thought of Richard's sneering face, of Eleanor's dismissive wave. They had not just insulted him. They had tried to erase him. They had declared him worthless. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about proving them wrong in the most absolute, undeniable way possible. It was about taking the source of their power, the very ground beneath their feet, and making it his own. "Do it," Liam said, his voice devoid of any hesitation. "Liquidate everything?" The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and tense phone calls. Liam, with David's guidance, began the painful process of dismantling his life's work. He sold his business, a thriving custom carpentry shop with a 6-month waiting list, to a larger construction firm. The new owner, a man who respected Liam's craftsmanship, looked at him with confusion. "You're at the top of your game, Liam. Why are you selling?" "Moving into project management," Liam lied, the words feeling foreign and slick in his mouth. "Time to use my head more than my hands." The irony was thick enough to choke on. He cleaned out his savings accounts, cashed in his retirement funds, paying the steep early withdrawal penalties without flinching. Each transaction felt like a small death, a severing of ties with the secure future he had planned. He moved the consolidated funds into the anonymous account set up for Bedrock Holdings. Seeing his life's savings reduced to a number on a screen, ready to be risked on a single audacious gamble, was nauseating. The secrecy was the hardest part. Sarah saw the strain on his face, the late nights he spent in his workshop, not sanding wood, but hunched over financial documents he barely understood. She saw the official-looking envelopes that arrived by courier. "What's going on, Liam?" she asked one night, her voice laced with worry. "You're so distant. Are we in trouble? Is the business failing?" He couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. She would try to stop him. She would beg him to reconcile with her family, to not make things worse. She was still trapped in their orbit, conditioned to believe that their stability was her own. "I'm restructuring," he said, another partial truth that felt like a lie. "I'm making a big investment, a new opportunity. It's complicated, but it's going to be good for us. For Emily, you have to trust me." "Trust you?" she replied, her voice rising. "How can I trust you when you won't even talk to me? You look like you haven't slept in weeks. You look haunted." He was haunted. Haunted by the risk he was taking, and haunted by the ghost of the man he used to be. Every conversation was a performance. He had to maintain the facade of the simple, hard-working carpenter, even as he was orchestrating a multi-million-dollar corporate takeover. The call from David came on a rainy Monday morning. "It's done," David said, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Scythe Capital accepted our offer. Bedrock Holdings just acquired the entire Hamilton debt portfolio for 19 cents on the dollar. Congratulations, Liam. You are now the primary creditor for every single property on Magnolia Lane." Liam sank into a chair in his workshop, the phone feeling heavy in his hand. He had done it. He felt no elation, no triumph, just a profound, hollow sense of dread and inevitability. He was now the owner of his brother-in-law Chad's debt. He held the mortgage on Richard and Eleanor's mansion. He was the wolf that the clever fox had invited into the henhouse. That weekend, as if on cue, an invitation arrived, not for him, but for Sarah and Emily, an engraved cardstock request for their presence at a birthday party for one of Sarah's cousins. The party was being held at Chad's house, on Magnolia Lane. "You should go," Liam said, his voice carefully neutral. "You and Emily should see your family." "What about you?" Sarah asked, searching his face. "Are you sure you don't want to—" "I'm sure," he said. "They don't want me there. It's better this way." But as they left, dressed in their party clothes, a new, colder thought entered Liam's mind. He needed to maintain his cover. If he suddenly became a recluse, they might get suspicious. He had to keep playing the part of the beaten dog. He changed into a clean shirt and drove his work truck, not to Chad's house, but to a spot down the street where he could park without being seen. He walked through the manicured gardens and landscaped yards, his work boots feeling like an intrusion on the hallowed ground. He slipped around to the back of Chad's sprawling, ostentatious house. Through the large glass doors of the patio, he could see the party in full swing. He saw Sarah talking to her mother, a strained smile on her face. He saw Emily playing with her cousins, blessedly unaware of the tension that crackled in the air. And he saw Richard and Chad, standing by the fireplace, Scotch glasses in hand, looking smug and secure in their kingdom. As he watched, he saw Richard's lawyer, a man named Arthur Vance, join them. Liam edged closer to the glass, hiding behind a large potted ficus. Their voices were low, but the patio door was slightly ajar. "Got the auditors off our backs for another quarter," Richard was saying, his voice a low murmur. "The shuffle we did with the Cayman account bought us some time." "Time for what?" Vance asked, his expression grim. "Richard, the Willow Creek numbers are a disaster. The project is insolvent. Scythe isn't going to wait forever. They'll call the note. Chad scoffed. Let them. They don't want a portfolio of half-finished houses or a street full of lawyers' wives. They're bankers. They'll renegotiate. They always do. Not these guys, Vance countered. Scythe Capital are not your friendly neighborhood bankers. They're asset strippers. They will take the houses, Richard. They will take everything. Richard waved a dismissive hand. You worry too much, Arthur. We have a contingency. A new investor from Singapore is showing interest. He'll buy out Scythe's position, and we'll be clear. It's all under control. Liam felt a cold smile touch his lips. A new investor. They were fishing for a savior, completely unaware that their fate had already been sealed. They were worried about Scythe Capital, the distant, faceless monster, while the real threat was standing 20 feet away, behind a plant, dressed in flannel. They had no idea that the asset stripper they feared was the same man they wouldn't allow at their dinner table. The dramatic irony was so thick, so potent, it was almost comical. He was their contingency. He was their final judgment. He slipped away before anyone could see him, the knowledge of his secret power, a heavy, satisfying weight in his chest. The acquisition of the main debt portfolio was the tipping point. The first domino had been pushed, and now the rest began to fall with astonishing speed. David, operating with the cold precision of a surgeon, began executing the next phase of the plan. Bedrock Holdings, the silent, faceless entity Liam now controlled, began to exert its pressure. The first official communication was a simple, formal letter sent from a prestigious law firm in Delaware that David had retained. It was addressed to Hamilton Development Corporation, with copies sent to the personal addresses of Richard, Chad, and the other 3 homeowners on Magnolia Lane. The letter was a masterpiece of corporate legalese, but its message was brutally clear. Bedrock Holdings, LLC, was the new holder of their consolidated debt, and an immediate audit of the associated collateral and the failing Willow Creek project was being initiated. Liam could only imagine the panic that letter would have caused. The name Bedrock Holdings would have meant nothing to them. It would have been a phantom, a mysterious new player emerging from the shadows. They would have scrambled, calling their lawyers, trying to figure out who these people were. They would have assumed it was a subsidiary of Scythe Capital or another, more aggressive vulture fund. The last person they would ever suspect was the son-in-law they had so thoroughly dismissed. Liam continued to play his part, a role that was becoming increasingly difficult. He was a man living a double life. By day, he consulted for the company that had bought his business, offering advice on projects, maintaining the fiction of his new management career. By night, he was the shadow owner of Magnolia Lane, poring over the reports David sent him. These reports detailed the Hamiltons' frantic attempts to secure new financing, to find the Singapore investor Richard had mentioned. Each attempt failed. The stench of the Willow Creek disaster was too strong. No one would touch them. The strain began to take a serious toll on his marriage. Sarah grew more and more suspicious. The man she had married, the open, honest craftsman, had been replaced by a secretive, brooding stranger. The sale of his business, which she had initially accepted as a career change, now seemed ominous. One evening, she confronted him, her hands on her hips, her face a mixture of fear and anger. She was holding a bank statement that had come in the mail, showing the massive transfer of funds from their joint savings to the Bedrock account. Bedrock Holdings LLC, she said, her voice trembling. What is this, Liam? You emptied our savings, our daughter's college